But I think I will start with something that actually quite agitated me yesterday, because we all had a lie-in yesterday. I live with John Waters, may not be aware. I live with my mother and father. And they're 91, and we have decided not to indulge in needlecraft because I'm keeping the language clear of the bugmen here tonight. And we had a knock on the door yesterday, and there was this man who had worked with my father. My father had been a very successful architect for a long time. Into his 80s, my father was working still. And they called by just to see how my dad was, ostensibly. I'm sure it had nothing to do with the lovely artwork that we've had on the garage door for this past 3 weeks. I'm sure the garage door didn't in any way influence them. But anyway, Anyway, he was there with his wife. And as we used to say in Dublin, do you remember face the old cow died to? That was a Dublin expression for a particular type of hatchet face. And she had that particular type of hatchet face. I mean, she had a real kind of 2 p.m. in a rainy November afternoon face in her. And we were chatting, and they were asking about how we're getting on. And I introduced myself, and I held out my hand for her to shake, and she did this. And
oh, the elbow bump or whatever?
Yeah, she did the elbow carry on. And I said, no, I'm not doing that. No. I said, I'm not Simon Harris. I do kind of carry on here. So that was not a good start. That was not a good start. And then they were asking how my parents were and about the work we'd had done on the house. And then they said, oh, by the way, we assume you've got your parents vaccinated.
Why would you assume?
Well, I said, no, I said, we haven't. And he said, well, what about yourself? Listen, I said, where is this leading? Oh, well, we're just concerned. Well, I said, we're very well here now. I said, and I have to get inside now if you don't mind. Oh, well, and do you know what the woman said then? She said, did your parents make that choice of their own decision? Listen, I said, I'm saying goodbye to you now.
And, who are these people? Do you even know who they are?
Oh.
Did they make that? No, what I did was I tied them down, and I said to them, no, you're going to live in the attic with the mice until the needlecraft is over. See, I'm checking myself for Facebook. See, and you know what? I mean, what a fucking inappropriate question to call to somebody's door and ask.
Do you even know? Do they know you guys?
The man had worked for my father for many years. My father had helped him train as an architect.
Oh, I see. Okay.
I'd never met her one before. I mean, she looked like she'd walked out of Jonestown. She really did have, she just was a horrendous individual altogether.
I hope you were dressed in your full bondage outfit at the time.
I wasn't. I was dressed in my pajamas, actually. And they were she was very nosy. She was asking questions about my parents. Why are we all up? Why can't they come out now? I mean, fuck off. A lot of work has been done in the house as well. And then we've noticed that we put in the diesel generator and the solar panels and all that kind of thing because we don't trust Eamon Ryan to keep the lights on. So see the lights now, that's all solar. That's not thanks to Eamon Ryan, But that was my day yesterday. And, as I said, my garage door probably is attracting. We've cleaned the garage door now. We put up another door, actually. But I'm giving the garage door a break for a while. But it does attract them. And I suppose in a way it triggers them, and it's funny. I would describe the garage door as an artistic installation, but at the same time, don't be calling in and asking questions about people's med history. So that was me yesterday.
So I have a story to tell kind of on the opposite end of the spectrum. We have several different on Facebook, we call them like the sell your sites websites where people can post looking for all different kinds of things. And there was a man that had posted in a public forum here looking for, his wife is pregnant, and she was looking for a place to go get her hair done that wouldn't require masks. And so I was going to say something on there and mention, I don't do that, but there was like hundreds of people being recommended on there, and it was going to get lost in the thread. So I just didn't say anything. And then a couple hours later, I got a message from the husband because the wife doesn't do Facebook. So I got a message from the husband, and he said, hey, your name came recommended in my inbox from a lot of trusted friends. Can I get my wife?
A lot of work has been done in the house as well. And then we've noticed that we put in the generator and
sorry. So anyway, so she ended up coming into the salon day before yesterday, and she was lovely. She was so nice. And I was running like 10 minutes behind. So I just went over there, I shook her hand and I said, I just have to clean up. I'll come grab you. And so then her and I got to talking, and she's totally tribe. She would love to be here. She just doesn't do social. But she said, she was literally, when you came over and met me and shook my hand, I texted my husband and said, oh my God, the hairstylist came over and shook my hand. Like, there's no madness here. She was so happy about that. And she said that the last place that she had gone to get her hair done was a couple weeks ago. And the lady, when she was shampooing her, they said the mask thing, and she said, I'm pregnant, I can't do it. And so when she was laying back in the shampoo bowl, getting ready to wash her hair, the lady took a fucking towel and put it over her face. And she said, she stood up. She said, I'm fucking done here. I'm not going to have the service. I'm just going to leave. And she put a towel over this woman's face without even saying anything, just put a towel over her face. And she was like, why are you doing this to me? And she said, well, it's just one way that we can keep each other safe since you won't wear a mask. And so her appointment was like 3 hours long. She originally just wanted to get her haircut, but then she decided that she was like, fuck it, I'm just going to do color too if you have time. I was like, let's do it. So she sat with me for like 3 hours, and we just had a great talk. And she just moved here from a different part of the state, and she's a stay-at-home mom with other little kids, and hasn't had the ability to meet anybody and make friends and like, mom to mom community type stuff, because everything's been shut down and people are freaked out. So she just was like over the top thankful of how welcome she felt. It was normal. It was sane. We were, shaking hands, and I gave her a hug at the end because I could just tell she had been so starved of any type of community for a long time.
This endless propaganda has conditioned certain types of people just to see other people as, bags of germs. Mm-hmm. Biohazards. It's not your fellow human being. It's a biohazard. I find this quite disturbing because we're dealing with the same kind of thing that happened with the 1934 racial laws in Nuremberg, where if you weren't of a certain pedigree, Aryan pedigree, you were deemed a lesser human being, an automatic assumption that you carried all these issues and problems with you that were detrimental to society at large. And that's basically what we have here again, except they've changed it from racial politics into bacterial politics.
Yeah,
I'm going to say we have. Sorry to interrupt. I want to welcome very warmly, and I emphasize very warmly, a very new member of the virtual tonight, John Waters. Good evening, John.
Good evening, Christian, and good evening, everybody. Thank you very much. I'm just listening to that, and I've been thinking about this the last few days, that something's shifting again in the underground, under our feet, and I can't quite figure out which of two things it might be at the moment. That what you described there, that kind of insanity, the derangement, the upping of the derangement factor in the last maybe even few days. It's either one of two things. It's either the hypnosis kicking back in with a vengeance, that idea that the people who have had the needle graft and are being set off against the people who haven't had the needle graft, and that's the whole dynamic that the totalitarian project now seeks. That's one aspect, and that may be what it is. The other possibility is that I had this feeling today when I saw an exchange of texts between a friend of mine, there was a thing on Twitter attacking a friend of mine, and it was so deranged that I thought, this is something else. This might be something else entirely. This might be actually what I call the appalling vista for these people, which is that the deniers were right all along. That idea may be seeping through now. And it's unbearable to these people because they were so hostile, so negative, so nasty for the past 18 months or more, that it's like death is almost preferable to them than being wrong, and being wrong in the face of people who they hate being right.
That's right, John. One of the things that we've analysed, and you may or may not agree with us, is that we are witnessing a Jonestown situation. Okay, I used it frivolously earlier and flippantly earlier, but when people are in a cult, they will kill or be killed before being allowed to be taken out of that cult. Now, I we've had a lot of work done on our house at the moment, and on my old garage door, I wrote, "Don't get the jab." And I also wrote on the front building of our house, "John and Gemma were right all along." That's what I wrote with chalk. John and Gemma were right all along. And
I've seen that. Yeah, I've seen that. Yeah. I don't know who this was.
I mean, people are shouting abuse off the road at me, and I'm saying to them, "Buddy, move on." You know, it's just a shagging wall on a house with chalk on it. But what we're doing is we're seeing that people in this cult are either going to, Jamie McCrell puts it very well. He says, if you're still believing, as that woman yesterday believed, that this is an appropriate thing to do to somebody who offers her a handshake. And Thomas Sheridan in previous video said, if they're doing that to you, they're not your friend. He said it in a video, I think last year. They're accusing you of being diseased if they want to do that to you when you've held out your hand in a handshake.
Yeah,
then,
if it's someone you normally hug, it's absolutely a poisonous shift in that dynamic.
I have a confession to make here to everybody, which is that I was caught in that situation there a couple of weeks ago. I was at a wedding with a lot of people I didn't know. And this guy, I was introduced to this guy, and I put out my hand, and he did this to me, you know. And in that kind of confusion, I actually went, I'm sorry to say, and please give me your forgiveness. I actually put up my elbow, just instinctively. It's the first time I've ever done it. And it'll be the last, I hope. But it almost came like a reflex action before I'd even become conscious that it was happening.
Well, I'll tell you about reflex actions. I found myself in May of this year checking the pronouns of somebody who I knew to be male. And at that point, I said, snap out of it now. That was for me the snap out moment.
I'll tell you.
No, I'm not. Yes?
I'll tell you an interesting story about automatic responses. One of my music friends up here, he was a really great guy, but he's very much wired into like so many musicians wired into the mainstream and regarding this particular topic. But he's a really good person and a fantastic guitar player. And he comes over to me a few weeks ago, and he does this, and he goes, and just that. And so I just laughed and did nothing. But he was serious. He wanted to do that elbow thing. Now, a few days later, somebody was playing on the stage, on an outside stage, and the guy couldn't play guitar to save his life, and all the notes were off key and everything on the guitar solos. And the same guy who wanted to do this out of safety came up behind me and put his arms around my shoulders like this and was laughing his head off at the guy who couldn't play. So it was like he wasn't himself when he did this. He was himself when he jumped around and put his hands around my shoulders like that with his head right here, going like this laughing. So it shows you it's a funny kind of programming in that there's only an onion peel layer away from liberating them in many ways, switching them off.
It's almost like
sorry.
It's like what Thomas is saying. It's almost like there's a form of dissociation that sorry, neighbors. It's almost like there's a form of dissociation that's been implanted into people somehow through the media or through something where it's like initially people are dissociated when they meet on the street and do the elbow stuff like that. But as soon as they become comfortable in their own space again, it breaks down just like most dissociation does. So I know, Christian, you've talked about some kind of like MK Ultra type mind control things with this. And I really wonder if there would be some type of like positive suggestion that's within the media or something that's causing people to dissociate like that. And then, you know, like Thomas, you're saying, immediately as he's himself again, he put his arms around you and he's back in his own identity.
Well, John and Gemma are on fire at the moment with Gemma, you know, on Gemma O'Doherty's podcast. They're absolutely on fire at the moment. And they had a thing, it was either last week or 2 weeks ago, in which John was talking about the trance. And we have never, Thomas Sheridan, myself, Jamie McCrell, John, Gemma, we've never been able to, at any point, find one expression that would define what's going on, either internationally or in an Irish context. But certainly in an Irish context, there is a whole, and Thomas has said this, there's a whole group of people who will walk over a cliff of the needlecraft rather than in their own heads insult the girl on RTE or the politician who they call by their first name. And I thought, John, your term, the trance, that moved me, and I was very struck by it. And then I said, well, John is right. I said, there is a trance here, because it really is trance. It really is.
And it affects even those of us who don't think we're affected or who try not to be.
That's right.
Because I was analyzing that situation at the wedding. I mean, the fact that I didn't know this guy, the fact that there were people around, I didn't want to start an argument with him. I didn't want to get into a disagreement with him. I didn't want to be impolite. All of that thing is all being tapped into. And what you see, one of the things about it is that if you weren't part of a group, part of a kind of a tribe, as Thomas says, it very well is possible that even a small incident like that might draw you into the thing, into the trance deeper. That's how subtle it is. You know, you really have to be on your guard all the time. I've actually been saying to people for a long time that, you know, don't ever imagine that you're immune. I don't watch TV, but if I were to turn on the TV tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock and leave it on for the next 5 or 6 days, I could be here next Sunday night telling you guys, you know, wash your hands. Come on.
Stay safe.
Can I check if anyone can actually see or hear me? Because on the first time.
Yay, you're here.
Hello.
So, can I be seen and heard?
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah.
Missing in action.
Yeah. Well, this is the first time I've done it on smartphone because it occurred to me looking at the footage posted online that the camera on my laptop is like over 10 years old and it looks really, really grainy. So if I can be seen or heard, that's great. So hello, everybody.
Like a pub. You don't look like a pub.
Oh, no. I look like a fucking library.
That's a hell of a book collection, though. I like it. The Lady of books.
I wish I'd read them.
No.
Bill's books I'd like to finish.
Yep.
Can I just tell you about an experience I had in the supermarket the other day? I think I might have inadvertently horrified quite a few of the customers in Lidl because I seen one of my friends that I haven't seen since the beginning of all this, and we both just walked towards each other, threw our arms around each other, and we were hugging in the middle of the aisle, and everybody was kind of like this. I didn't even think, oh, that's going to draw attention, because it was just, oh my God, I haven't seen you for so long. Oops.
How far removed has society become from humanity in that normal acts of, friendliness and love have become weird?
Extremely weird.
Well, we know what happens to babies if they don't receive that, maternal contact, physical contact. What happens to children's development in the rare cases when that occurs? It's extremely damaging.
Yeah, that's why nurses have to pick up babies in orphanages and hug them every so often. They will have all kinds of neurological and cognitive development issues later on in life.
Yeah,
absolutely. And it's just like it reminds me of the Anti-Sex League in 1984. Is that when people are happy and affectionate, they don't have a problem in the world. If you take that away from them, they become hostile and angry. It's the same effect as the unhugged baby. In an adult, they become hostile.
Yeah, loads of times I think like one individual, usually a guy, and some girl, and said they just need a really good fuck.
Oh, can I just quickly? Can I quickly change subjects here for a second, just to jump out? You reminded me of something, Greg. Today at the market I work at, this very attractive, tall, 6-foot, blonde girl, quite glamorous, was walking through the place wearing a very tight pair of spandex black pants, like Olivia Newton-John did in the movie Grease. Now, this made me notice for two things. One, I'm a heterosexual male. And two, I haven't seen girls wearing those kind of trousers since the heavy metal days.
I have those pants. I wear them every day.
Yeah, well, you do, but I mean, like, respectable women. But Greg,
I love you, Thomas.
I know, it's tough love, but it's what I noticed was watching this girl, and not just as an observational thing. 20 or 10 years ago, every red-blooded male's head, even from the age of 16 to 60, would have automatically had, because she was a head turner, would automatically have just glanced over out of just look like that. She walked through a building full with hundreds of healthy men in their 20s, and not one of them looked at her as if she was an object of desire.
The fuck?
When she walked by. And that was like quite disturbing to me, because it seems to me that here we have the soy agenda, whatever, is real. It was not natural. She was a girl that was a head turner. And all these men were just, who should be at the age where they're at their testosterone is firing and they're in that mode, didn't even look twice at her. It was quite remarkable to me.
That's crazy. I see that in gyms all the time. Like, there'd be absolutely stunning females in there, and you just got to look at their ass. And the guys don't even know. It's really weird. Yeah.
And then you see, do you remember that thing that they tested the guys who work for some magazine at their testosterone levels, and they had the testosterone levels of 78-year-old men from their vegan diets and from the soy instead of milk and dairy products?
I remember that. They worked for Vox, didn't they? Yeah, four lads.
That seems to be catching on among, say, middle-class guys now everywhere.
Yeah. I'm from Southside Dublin. It's kind of all normalized around where I am, though. Lots of girls get into that fashion style. I just sort of desensitized to it, but it was also very normalized across the field for women's fashion just in general. And it's kind of strange because that just sort of, now this is where it gets a little interesting, because there's a recent thing that happened up around by Dublin too. Well, not Dublin too, but Dublin as well. There was a situation that people became aware of at the end of Halloween about like, all these teenagers up around by the south side, a lot of them tend to have a fair few drug problems. And I'm just like, holy shit. Well, all this has been happening over the past 2 years. These kinds of issues, such as depression and all that, have gotten worse, but it's creeped in there along with the fashion, to just like, they want to go and have the kids not be kids anymore and to grow up too fast, essentially. But they don't even know what they're taking on. So, yeah, it's kind of interesting.
Well, I'm convinced that growing up too fast is this like legal I know I said something very controversial yesterday, and I totally stick by it. The only great goal left for liberal and left-wing politics at this point, they got everything else: the legalization of pedophilia, the reducing of sexual access to children, and I'm convinced everything from immigration policy to this thing of sexualizing them at a very early age, teaching them about gay sex when they're in kindergarten and stuff, which these trannies coming in and reading to them and so on in kindergarten. I honestly do believe that this is what they call the preemptive strike, the artillery bombardment before they go in there with this. This is their holy sacrament. They've gotten legalized abortion, they've got gay everything, all the classic things that was desired by liberalism have been attained. And rather than saying we won the war, they're now going, what was the one thing that's left over? And all of a sudden, all these types that were in like the PIE in England in the 80s and so on, these Peter Tatchell types, are emerging into the political system. And I find this extremely disturbing. And I think there's a huge agenda there that's hidden to try and legalize this stuff.
Well, I remember.
Thomas, when I went to
Even hidden anymore.
Sorry, John, what were you going to say then?
No, I was just going to agree with that. I mean, I think that, when you think, you've got to think about woke in terms of like a business. It's like a corporation. Woke is a corporation, and therefore they need product. And they've actually, as it were, sold out of all their other products or whatever. Those brands have become kind of, so they've now got to create new brands. Yeah. And you're right. I mean, what other aspects of life can they attack in order to justify their continued existence? So I think, it's like, it seems incredible at one level that could be so. But remember, it did happen before. It was happening in the 70s. In Germany, in the Green Party there, and in various little pockets like that, and was beginning to spread until I think what happened was they began to see that actually, there's an opportunity here to take down the church. So let's avail of that first, and then we'll get back to our own agenda of the same thing. So I think that's kind of very true. But, one of the things we've learned in the last couple of years, we've learned many things, but one of them has got to be that everything we knew was wrong about human nature, about human beliefs, about human assertions about beliefs, that people who told us they were left liberals were nothing of the kind. They didn't know what it meant. They're actually the first in the queue to join the tyranny now, to become totalitarians. That's what they want. And they want totalitarianism opposed on everybody, whoever disagreed with them about anything. And COVID actually, has been weaponized in this way precisely. Very early on, it was possible to see this bizarre phenomenon whereby, if you were kind of supportive of the government's policies on a health issue, that meant that you were left wing. And if you were opposed to it, that meant you were far, not just right, but far right.
All right.
And they created this kind of meme or trope very, very early on in a very ingenious way, possibly partly by bouncing it off Donald Trump, the big virtue of them actually stirring him up somewhat against COVID, although that's very ambiguous to me, that they managed then to create this idea that the way to actually be left liberal was to be completely supportive of the COVID agenda and the lockdown agenda. But that's a temporary. I mean, I don't know. Is this temporary or is it permanent? Is it terminal? But if it does end, and when it ends, then I think that, as Thomas says, that's going to be the next thing on the agenda, the paedophile agenda, for sure.
Yeah.
Everything that the left does, if you look at it, is always dressed up as good. And I'm not, I'm like most of you guys, I'm not left or right. You're kind of in the middle. You're watching from all angles. And everything the left does is dishonest. It's always dressed up as a good cause. And it always seems to be a death cult. I'll give the right their dues. Everything they do, they lay it out right in front of you. This is who we are. This is what we want. The left, they lay it out as a good cause. And for me, everything that the left does, and it always ends up being a death cult or anti-human, an attack on the working class. It's always dressed something nice, and it always ends up being something disgusting.
Yeah.
And the difference between the left and the right are always completely honest about their objectives, be they good or bad, usually bad, but you go too far on either scale, it's not good. But the left always dress it up as good, and it for everything, it always seems to be not good.
Like not arresting grooming gangs in the north of England because it's racist.
There you go.
So you sacrifice young girls in those neighborhoods to their, it's just, again, the moral parameters they set are almost like, planting mines in a minefield and telling it to go plow the field. It's like that.
Two things about that thing you mentioned, Thomas, about the lady walking through that public area. I can't remember if you said it was a mall or whatever. But we've talked about this before on here, actually, is the influence of pornography on particularly young men, young women as well, and in their normal sexual development, because online pornography, really explicit, and a lot of it we can call unnatural. I think you know what I mean. As being pervasive now for so long, you've got a generation and soon to be a second generation growing up just saturated with this, and that definitely has an effect on normal sexual development, and desires and forming of relationships and how all of that works. Second thing is the influence of what we've been referring to as the woke agenda. So that looking at a woman as somehow kind of, is 10% rape or something. If you go, oh man, she's gorgeous, oh, no, you can't say that. Don't even think that, even though that's how all human, personal and sexual relationships begin. Usually you see someone and you physically, maybe then you speak to them. That's how it begins. But this agenda is such that, you cannot talk about a member of the opposite or same sex, whatever floats your boat. You can't acknowledge your physical attraction to them because that's not politically correct.
Politically correct.
It's like,
gone mad.
I've been looking.
Any normal can become normal with normies. That I think that's the danger, isn't it? Like this is reprogramming for the new normal of what sexuality is, and that's probably why they're suppressing male, heterosexual desire and everything. And it's pretty dangerous.
There is
Redirecting it.
There is a way around this, guys. Eat meat, eat dairy, and do stuff to lift your testosterone.
But you know, they're also suppressing gay people as well, because when I was growing up, the few gay pubs around Dublin, I can remember a lot of the gay guys that were in them were kind of hard and tough. And you didn't start, these was the days of the queer, and if you started on them, you could get the shit kicked out of you, with some of them. And then since the Will and Grace kind of TV show, the gay male archetype now is this sort of like namby-pamby side boy, who's very unsexual in terms of his male prowess or behavioral or anything. Is more like a teenage girl at a Westlife or a boy band concert. And even though he might be in his 40s or 50s. And I think that's a deliberate thing as well. I think they didn't like the sort of like the Rob Halford image, the Rob Halford type gay archetype. They didn't even like the Quentin Crisp type one. What they wanted was the guy from Will and Grace, a little girl in a man's body, being the archetype representing gay men today.
That's right. I have a friend at the moment, and he's 31, and he's an electrician, and he is a rugby player, and he's gay. And he said to me, there's nothing for us. He said, if you go to places like the Georgia, that it's full of trannies. He says, it's full of all of these screaming, it's full of people waving their arms around in the air and pride flags. He said, I've never gone on a pride march. I never will go on a pride march. I never have gone on a pride march. And he and I were chatting and saying there is now, for what Thomas has just described, there's no platform for those kind of people. And I mean, this is the end now of Trans Awareness Week. Hold on. They were all over Pride this year like a bloody rash. In June of this year, the trannies were left, right, and centre. Now we've just had Trans Awareness Week. Just now, no, sorry, we're aware of you. It's okay. We know you never shut up. We're aware of the trannies now. And again, I'll thank John Waters he has a brilliant blog. I'm going to give him a plug here, Unchained by John Waters. I subscribe to it. Very good blog. And he talks about he talks in one of your posts, John, you talk about bullies and nonces and how our country is controlled by bullies and nonces. And it is. And those gay men like my friend or like myself, we're finding that we don't want to go to these venues like your man's play. I won't say his name, the unfunny drag queen in Maple Street. I mean, we won't go to that place. And it's the same with the George. We want to be around men. We don't want to be around people pretending to be women or people who've had operations and then have told themselves in their head that they're women. So again, John, homophobic. Gemma is homophobic. Gemma is not homophobic. But there is this differential between gay men and people who are saying they're transgendered.
I think there's a broader argument too about young men. I think young men have had a terrible time for like 2 or 3 decades now, and very intense antagonism towards them as males, as men, as boys. And they don't know what to do. And they certainly don't know what to do publicly in a sexual context with regard to women. They actually are kind of, they can get on with women, but as mates. And it's very difficult for them to cross that line because the grammar is all dissolved. It's all scattered. They haven't a clue what to start. I see them, and it's not that they're PC or anything like that. They are publicly. But I've seen some of them operating where like men of my generation, are pretty kind of, old-fashioned in their way they talk about women. And these young guys find that hilarious. Like they crease up laughing, but they don't do it themselves, right? They're not like that themselves in public. They may want to be like that. They may desire that they had that kind of chutzpah or whatever it is to break that taboo, because women actually, generally speaking, don't mind that kind of talk at all. But I saw a very interesting thing some time ago in a park. I was sitting there, and there was this bunch of young people, like late teens, early 20s, and they were kind of having a water fight. And there was two very beautiful girls there, and they were kind of throwing water at particular guys. I watched them, and they were using the water as a kind of a flirtation. It was obvious to me, but the guys didn't see that at all. They thought they were being attacked, and they started viciously attacking the women back with buckets of water. When in fact, they were getting the come on from these two women, and they couldn't see it. It was really amazing to see that they've lost the instincts almost in a generation or two. Those kind of primal instincts that males had are gone.
That's weird. Someone said that men are acting more feminine in order to be accepted by women now, because of masculinity is all toxic because of the reprogramming. Men are
male feminists.
Yeah, they're becoming feminine in order to actually form relationships and actually even get laid. They're changing their mannerisms, but it's a subconscious thing. It's like they actually don't even know it, and I found that kind of interesting.
Hello. I mean, that's interesting, Robert, but it's not the way I would go. And to be honest, I can't see that working. Like, I just go about being a guy, and kind of works, man. Those girls don't.
Too, I agree, yeah.
But I think that, Robert, that's just kind of what the media is trying to, the likes of Vice is putting out there. I think on the ground, I think women are craving real men.
Oh yeah.
Definitely.
I just signed up to Tinder. I can confirm that. But yeah, I still look like shit, so they're not going to have us.
I don't agree with it. It was just a theory somebody put out there. But,
yeah, I think that's classic how the agenda works. You'll have stories put into newspapers or organs, pardon expression, such as Vice, and they'll try to make out it's a happening trend. I've even seen that thing on the national websites of like RTE and BBC, where they try to make out it's some kind of new behavior. Everyone is doing it, and that's been going on a long time, at least since the Fabian Society came in.
Manufactured consent is the technique. Yeah. They make it look like it's popular when it isn't.
When it isn't, yeah, and that was the new normal. But it never. The reality is on the ground. It doesn't take off. It may affect certain superficial types, but in general, it doesn't. And I think they have a lot. I mean, they have a long way to go before they do that. I can even remember back in the 80s, there was a singer called Frank did a song called "Sensitive New Age Guy," and it was sending up the kind of sensitive New Age guys, like that pretend, I'm really into my chakras, this kind of thing, that were trying to get laid. But that kind of carry on has been around for a long time. But in the past, it was considered farcical. That was, you'd have someone parodying it. Now they try to put across things like Vice and these other rags as a thing, as an actual thing that's happening.
It's crazy because here in the Pacific Northwest, especially around Seattle, Olympia, anywhere in the major densely populated cities within the Pacific Northwest, that is the main archetype for heterosexual men. The kind of, like Thomas, you're talking about, the Will and Grace type, where it's like, going through a divorce here, I've been through the dating apps and everything, and most women are looking for a man who's a feminist and all these archetypes and everything. And it just is kind of like a case study. I've kind of just like poked into this a little bit to see what's going on there. And it is such a strangely disgusting thing that the majority of women who are 18 to 35 age range are looking for that type of feminine man. And there are plenty of them. A lot of the people I know or were associated with who work in the tech industry or in the periphery of it are that kind of not girly man, but just beta soy type male.
Well, let's go there. Is the relationship between the tech industry and this an actual factor?
Yeah, I would. Yeah. Well, yes, but also too, we have to take into consideration that is kind of like the emerging archetype within, like, I would say, the American consciousness now, that the majority of the United States is taking on this tech type, where it's not like in the 1990s or early 2000s where the tech type was like this this kind of edgy, computer programmer, maybe chaos magician type. No, that is kind of like the new blue collar working class American now works somehow either for Amazon or for a tech startup, not necessarily as a software engineer, but as someone who works in human resources, customer success, all these different aspects and attributes of the tech industry, not just as a computer nerd who knows, C++ or some kind of computer language, but like there's all these other people who work in the periphery of the tech industry who aren't necessarily artists with code, with Python or something, but they are the type that just works for Amazon in some capacity, or works for a tech startup in some capacity other than as an engineer, because the engineers are kind of like almost the more the more sane people of that group, but it's all these other ones that
it's totally suited for the woke.
Yeah, right.
Wokeness.
The woke agenda and everything that's going on right now. But it's just strange because, like, going and trying to meet women in the Puget Sound region, they're all looking for fucking feminists. They say on their dating profile apps, make sure your feminism is intersectional.
What does that even mean?
Right. And so it's a real thing. And it's down in Southern California too. It's along the coastlines. It's in the major populated areas of the US. And I mean, it's just as a case study, I've just looked into this a little bit to see, yeah, this is what people are looking for. And they are meeting types like this. There are plenty of men who are meeting women and having this kind of relationship with them. I've known some of them. I know some of them have gotten married to women,
Are they happy?
Yes.
Are they happy in that kind of relationship? Hi. Hey.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's just happiness, but does happiness equate to sanity? No. I mean,
and is it happy? I think it's the thing that they feel like they have to do, and we've talked about this so many fucking times. With you have to make these certain choices to be able to be suitable or eligible or whatever to be a part of these societal constructs, which I've honestly never been happier since being removed from society.
Well, subconsciously they want a real man, don't they? Subconsciously, but maybe they just programmed, like you say.
Yeah, that's the thing. They end up going for that type. They end up going for that type. The if we just want to call them the beta male, which is cries and does all those things. Now, like I don't know. I was in the kitchen. I don't know who it was who was saying it, but that idea of trying to like meet a woman and get laid or whatever it is, having to become more of that type of and that's what I don't know if it's. I would say subliminally, that's what most of that type of woman from Seattle is looking for. Is that not? They might unconsciously, because of their body mind, be craving real male sexuality, but are subconsciously or subliminally looking for the soy boy type, looking for someone who's basically a woman in a man's body, is what I'm trying to say.
I'd like to speak on this for a second. Oh, sorry, go on.
It's time to fish in a different pond.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll move it out to Wyoming with cowboys or something like that. Or
I'm a bit of a hermit, so it's okay.
Tina says, the feminist man cannot think of anything that could make vaginas dry up faster, not even if you poured sand in them.
Reading that.
And there's case studies as well, loads of these different stories of male feminists who work within media or within tech companies, and they all sell themselves as being progressive, okay? And they all make their workspaces a living fucking hell. And the big one was Neil Druckmann, the guy who produced The Last of Us 2. And the game flopped. It was a complete flop. Someone leaked about it because the work conditions in the place was an absolute nightmare. One of the lead key writers, who was a woman in the industry for years, Amy Hennig, just actually up and left the series, up and left Naughty Dog. And it's all down to this guy. And he's a staunch believer in male feminism. And that is,
There's no thing.
There is a thing. That is the thing. They all sell themselves within these circles by calling themselves male feminists. And the thing is that's the thing.
There's so many of them. There's so many. Yeah.
Yeah, but they're all basically living hollow lives, and they always fail, almost all the time. And I know a guy who could be, mistaken as being very nerdy, very left wing, and even progressive in certain ways. But he's got an undercurrent to him. He actually has class as a person, so he's got the ability to be charming, and at the same time, he hasn't done it. He hasn't needed to do it, but he can also be very dangerous. So his looks deceive. He's a very smart man in that sense. But a lot of people just generally don't tend to get that, and they don't necessarily understand his grace, that spark in him. And that's the thing. They all want to be someone like that, but they just haven't done the work as a person to get there.
No matter what stories we tell ourselves, I don't think that what men want and what women want has changed in however many hundreds of thousands or possibly even millions of years that modern humans have existed on the earth.
I agree.
Yeah, I believe our archetypes are innate. Whatever archetype you are, that's innate. And you can't, to move against what your archetype is. And God, literature is filled with this stuff. You know, cinema, poetry, songs, it's filled with this stuff that when you try to move outside your archetype or your innate archetype that you've inherited through the collective unconscious, whatever, that you do go into psychosis. You absolutely do. And your archetype could be to be out there and extreme and stuff like that. And if you bottle that in, you will go nuts. If your archetype is a traditional heterosexual male and you're trying to act like a male feminist, you will go into psychosis. This has been well known. This is the Reggie Perrin effect, where Reggie was going insane because Reggie wasn't really Reggie. He was a different archetype than what the life that English middle class society had put him into. So they're all doomed to fail.
Yeah, but I think that's very interesting. But I think that there is a kind of a bifurcation in the male personality now as between the public and the private, in many, not all men, obviously. But I think that a lot of men are presenting a front of PC. And behind it in private, they're actually quite the antithesis.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And I have this kind of dystopian kind of movie script idea, which is, given the way things are happening in all kinds of ways now, the things that we never thought would happen are actually happening. If you actually think about this thing, right, there's something like 5 or 6 microphones on this thing. So everywhere you go, everything you say is being recorded or listened to or monitored, right? Potentially, right? So I can see a kind of a series of show trials, maybe in 10 or 15 years time, of people who have presented a PC front to the world, but actually in private were actually the opposite. And that this will be justified on the basis of hypocrisy or some such thing. And you'll see these guys being dragged out and being presented as these racist, misogynistic, homophobic SNSs, you know. And I think that it will be an amazing movie. I think we should make the movie before it actually happens, because it will pretty soon.
It'd be pretty funny to make a movie of that, yeah. I'll try find someone. But I was looking up some stuff, the weapons of the enemy, and it all starts, to me, I think it all starts 100 years ago, the systemization of propaganda and information flow as done by Edward Bernays. But the thing is that, like, ever since he died in 95, they've just doubled down and they've, you know, made it more specific and cut it and spliced it into so many different ways so that everything's specific now. With you know, they always keep on shifting the goalposts in the progressive causes. So it used to be like women, and then it was, you know, the different races, and now it's going over to sexual issues, and now it's going over to trans issues as well, specifically. They've constantly just like backed themselves into this corner, and everything has to go and be an odd, vague jumble. But it's all useless because, you know, at the end of the day, they're only programmed. They're programmed to only operate in one way, and that's the thing. They have acted and manifested in such a way as to go and be a completely predictable person. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah.
Sounds really boring too, doesn't it? Wouldn't it be awful to be a really predictable person?
Oh yeah.
The thing with Edward Bernays is, I don't believe he actually cared about what he was doing. He was only in it for the money. When he died, he was living in absolute spectacular wealth. He rented the entire top floor of a posh Manhattan hotel and lived basically like a king lived in the Middle Ages. And I think one of the last things he ever said was, well, I got rich on people being idiots. The thing is, Bernays did it out of money. He did it for personal gain. And I'm not saying that's a good thing to do, but at least he had an objective. It was actually to line his own pockets. Since he died, the people who've taken that ball and run with it are doing it almost instinctually, as if they think they have to do it. And there's no personal gain in it for a lot of them. It's just almost like a disease or a virus that is taken into society.
Oh, he was a massive fucking sexist, and he helped around people who were involved in Planned Parenthood in the United States. Margaret Sanger, one of his bestie mates for his business. He systemized all of these kinds of ways of looking at people, and I think he made crony capitalism, and he gave the tools to Nazism and communism as well. So all of it can be traced sort of back to him. But he was a cynic at the end of the day. I think, despite that, though, they never addressed him. And as a result of that, they sort of like took on all of his mythologies without realizing it.
Yeah.
That could just be an idea, though.
No, that's what I was trying to say. It was almost like he planted a seed that, like, I don't know, flowerless plants took on and grew, without actually having anything in there for them. Almost like for the sake of it, becoming, at least his mythologies were driven about personal gain. They're doing it just because they think they have to, and it will, that will lemon personal destruction for them.
But Carl, just to answer and to carry on from what you've just said, I mean, what you're saying is completely correct. Jamie McCrell in Northern Ireland, he does some great videos and he has a great speaking voice as well. I don't know the fucking shite that is. But Jamie is saying that if you have a series of facts in front of you and what you are parroting is different from those facts that are in front of you in your day-to-day life, but they're eerily similar to what might be coming out of our friends in Montrose, then your denial of the facts in front of you and your replacement of those with the other false narrative is clear and consistent evidence that you're in a cult. Now, people who are in a cult will never say, oh, yes, mom, dad, I'm just going off to join a cult. I'll be back at 5 p.m. when I leave the cult. I'll just check in. You don't check in and out of a cult. People who are in a cult do not know that they are in a cult. And no cult ever calls itself a cult. So what you're getting at, Carl, is that Bernays got people to change their entire mental framework without knowing they were doing so and thinking that they were doing so for their own free will. Again, we're getting back to something that's a big issue for me, is in May of this year, I found myself on Twitter before I got a lifetime ban from Twitter for saying there are only two genders. I got a lifetime ban from Twitter for that. Hey, I'm up there with Donald Trump, but I am
a worthy hill to die on.
I like how Sarah got banned
on Twitter. Sorry. I found myself checking pronouns of an individual who I knew was male. Oh, no. I said, fuck that. I said, that means how far have they got into my head? Where I'm tiptoeing on eggshells here regarding pronouns for what I think is, and I think the transgender thing is a very dangerous cult. I think it's one of the most dangerous cults that is out there. And it runs kind of like, as we were saying, as John was saying, as others were saying, if you want to be a good citizen, you buy into the COVID cult. You're showing people, wearing a mask. Hey, everybody, I'm wearing a mask. You're showing people what a good member of society you are by buying into the government narrative. But that is a cult. John talked about the trance. Jamie McCrell talks about the cult, and that's right. And, in one particular social media post, Thomas said that the level of brainwashing that RTE does here is something that would make Edward Bernays green with envy.
Yeah, I do.
Easily.
Green with envy.
Have any of you guys seen that documentary? It's called The Century of the Self. I think you can actually find it for free on YouTube now. I think it's 4, it might be 6. I think it's a 4-part documentary. And I want to say it was produced and released in the 90s, but it's called The Century of the Self. We actually watched this in high school, which is actually probably the only good thing that I ever got out of my fucking educational time. But it's all about the story of Edward Bernays and what he did with his marketing and how it all had to do with social engineering, human consciousness programming, and how you can use all of that stuff to tap into the emotional side of people to get them to do something without them ever really knowing. They can never pinpoint what the trigger was. But it's really, really good. I mean, obviously everybody here pretty much knows about Edward Bernays, but it is a really, really worthwhile documentary.
It was once a time in the BBC in the 1990s where they were actually producing fantastic stuff.
Yeah.
That series. They also had another series, I go back to now and again, called The Death of Yugoslavia, which is a 10-hour series on the BBC produced back then. And I see so many parallels with today's world, particularly how it all kicked off. And when Tito died, they had various factions going around, Yugoslavia, as it was known then, accusing them of being racist against other minorities in the area, when in many cases they were not, until opportunists jump in and said, hold on a second, I'll stand the ground for you. And what was it, 50 years Tito was in power, 45 years of this pent up, told not to believe the reality in front of your own eyes. And when that mirage was taken from the people in Yugoslavia, it descended into the most, very quickly, by the way, into the most ferocious violence that was unimaginable in modern Europe, post-World War II Europe. Now, what kicked that off was a soccer match between Red Star Belgrade and Dynamo Zagreb, the two rival Croatian team and the Serbian team, and a brilliant player called Boban kicked a policeman who was beating up Dynamo fans, and that was literally, they all said that something happened with that act, that it was almost like all the 45 years of programming had ended when one player on the team said, no, this is not going to happen ever again. The police state is over. And this is like, I sometimes think today, are we waiting on a kind of a Boban moment? And we know when Barry Clapton and Van Morrison have stood up and said nothing. But what would happen if someone, say, like, I don't know, Bono or a Bruce Springsteen or someone like that level, or a Madonna turned around and said the whole thing is a scandemic and bullshit? Would the house of cards fall like it did in Yugoslavia in 1990?
Certainly.
Sorry, just a thought. Just a quick thought. I mean, related to that, but about all this Bernays and behavioral stuff. I mean, we clearly see this is actually lethal to the human project, to human existence, virtually. We've seen that in the last 2 years, that they can paralyze an entire society with terror or hypnosis or whatever it is. So there's two options, it seems, and I keep saying this, because there's lots of things we're going to have to do, quote unquote, if we ever get out of this. But one of them has got to be either one or two things. Either we ban all this stuff, or we start teaching it to children from the age of about 6, so they know exactly what they're looking at when it's being done to them or when it's being attempted on them. Because, like, adults, intelligent PhDs, highly educated people are going around in trances because of watching this TV every night and seeing the same message being pummeled at them. And it's quite unbelievable to observe it. Like, it seems impossible, but it's actually happening.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got even friends who I would consider to have been awake for, quite a number of years, who have gone ahead and gotten the needlecraft. And the only thing I can really put it down to is that they're still watching TV.
Yeah, I've got something to throw in by way of a thought experiment. And this was inspired, well, I came up with it last year in response to a friend. And I was reminded of it today, Thomas, when I was watching your video from today and also from yesterday. Very powerful, very erudite. And it's a simple thought experiment which becomes more relevant, I think, as the days go by now. We look at events happening in, can I say Austria without this whole video getting taken down? I'm not sure. we all know what we're talking about. And this friend of a friend said last summer, when things were just starting to really ramp up with what are now current events, I would wear a hazmat suit to the supermarket if it would save one life. Oh. And I'm thinking, okay, fair enough. That's a sentiment you want to, you could save a life. You would go to quite an extreme there to save one life. Fine. So I thought to myself, right, now, would you, taking what was just been said, would you commit suicide in order to save the life of an unknown stranger you will never meet? And I was told, oh, you just be stupid. I said, just go with it. Would you do that? You take your own life in the knowledge that somebody you have never met, you will never meet, will live instead of die. You'd probably say no, because just on a numbers game, there's no point. Okay, so somewhere between the hazmat suit and killing yourself, is there a point at which you will say, I will go no further? So the nub of the question is there anything that you will not acquiesce to in the name of what's currently happening? Is there anything you will not do because you've said you're not going to top yourself for a random stranger, but you will wear the hazmat suit? There has to be a point in between there. There has to be. And I've found that people I've put this to have been very, very uncomfortable with it because it forces them to think about what they think. And often they don't think about what they think and what they feel. And they have to actually reflect on what's happening on their precious television and how that relates to where the line might be. Everybody's got a line, a red line, no matter what they say.
Yeah, that's that, that part of human consciousness that we have that they call it metacognition, where, we have the ability to think about what we're thinking about. And so many people have sacrificed that in order to just take on the programming so that they're good little boys and girls and they do what they're told and they toe the line and they don't hurt anybody's feelings and they don't kill anybody, these people that they've never met that mean fuck all to them, absolutely nothing. But they'll sacrifice all of these amazing things that it means to be human without ever even giving it a thought, which is the irony.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. I think, look at normies. I mean, you could probably program them to be racist or not racist. It made me think of when my dad was at school, his school teacher told a racist joke. It was awful. He said, you hear one about the Negro that stuck its head out the window, it battered itself to death with its own lips, and everyone laughed. And that was normal, but maybe that same type of person could be programmed to be a Black Lives Matter kind of fanatic. Do you see where I'm coming from? That's the danger, isn't it?
That's actually correct.
I've no doubt about that. You're absolutely right, Rob. No doubt about that. I've seen it with people I know that used to howl laughing when I used to play Bernard Manning DVDs. Now, I find Bernard Manning to be a brilliant stand-up comic. I've never been bothered by his anti-Irish jokes because they're not anti-Irish, they're just Irish jokes. They're not full of hatred. They're just funny. They're just very funny, witty one-liners. And I think it's healthy to laugh at yourself to a degree once it doesn't become demeaning. And I never got that off his humor that it was demeaning. But my God, they're actually pissed off now that I still have those DVDs.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And they would have, and they just loved his controversial comedy back in the day as much as anyone. But now it's all like, I'm not watching that.
Yeah, like Roy Chubby Brown and even 40 Towers and yeah.
Right, and it's like, at the end of the day, I really don't give a fuck what anybody decides to think, as long as they can think about what they're thinking about and have their own reason for having that thought process. But when they're just fucking, spouting back some fucking one-liner that they saw off the TV or whatever, and you ask them, well, why? What makes you feel that way? Why do you actually think that? Do you have your own process behind what your conclusion is? And they spout some fucking regurgitated bullshit, and they can't ever tell you how they ended up at that conclusion because they didn't end up at that conclusion by themselves.
Also, something being taboo adds a certain gravitas to it in terms of its ability to have a strength behind it. So like a forbidden song or a forbidden joke takes on a tremendous power level when it's considered wrong. Like I remember when I was a little kid first hearing punk rock music and hearing, I'm old enough to remember the Sex Pistols started up. I was like 13 or 12 or 13. And I can remember that was considered absolutely outrageous. But there was something about that outrageousness that drew me to it and made me realize, well, this is pretty good music. I quite like it. And Malcolm McLaren understood that. That's why he deliberately stoked those fires. There's something to that, the taboo thing. I remember seeing an interview recently with Howard Stern. When he was on commercial radio in the US, he had this thing with the FCC, you can't say these 7 words on mainstream radio. So as a result, he had to get around them by being very clever in his comedy. When he moved to satellite radio on Sirius, he could say any word he wanted and tell jokes about anything. And he said, overnight, I stopped being funny. I stopped being funny. Now, we all know that the one person who can insult the king and live is the court jester. And the court jester is almost like the moral conscience of the court, how they really feel about the king. But we're not allowed a court jester anymore. we have to always keep our mouth shut and always maintain the facade. And that's why those people you were saying, Robert, that they can be flipped over like this, they're only being held there by political correctness. They're not being held there by any actual belief or something they actually hold within them.
Yeah, and isn't the trick of that inversion is the trick behind it is that in those old days when there was a certain kind of humor that was disapproved of, usually it was about humor against forms of authority, say like the church or political establishments or whatever, and you would get a certain kind of disapproval from certain quarters. Now, PC defines the defended categories as victims. So if you use humor against them, you are somehow, the culture can contrive to make you seem like a bad person to everybody in the vicinity. So that a space clears all around you and you're left kind of there, nobody laughing at your jokes, and suddenly you're like a pariah. That kind of trick of the culture is really, you got to think, well, that's got to be part of what's going on now in a more general sense. It's part of control. It's part of reaching into your very brain, into your home, into your living room, and twisting something so that you stop doing something that you always thought was natural.
What will it take to break the consensus trance, though? This is what I'm thinking about at the moment. What is going to have to happen for...
Well, Nicole, I'm very much obliged to Nicole for that, because what you've done is you've now ensured that we're going to get a YouTube strike just for that. So we can all kind of talk a bit more freely now. I was the person, I swear to God, I got us the YouTube strike last week, 2 weeks ago.
Apologize.
No, that was me.
Don't. We'll just put it... No, we can put it on Odyssey. You do an hour... You can't do an hour of this without getting
Jason has become very good at
editing.
at censorship.
Thank you, Jason.
So, Jason has this magician quality now where he will actually...
He sees me pop on and his finger's ready. Yeah. He's like, oh shit.
Is US Marine training. He's watching the clock and he's writing it down on a post-it.
Well, no, before we started tonight, I was going to say to myself, who tonight is going to get us the YouTube strike tonight now? And well done, Nicole. Fair play to you. Big round.
Thank you very much. Well I appreciate your appreciation. And I wanted to...
There we go.
Odyssey... about
it's always the one you least expect, the nice lady down in Alabama.
You must not know me. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the trans thing, because interestingly enough, as you pointed out, I live in Alabama, and the job that I had at the Dunkin', I worked with 2 trans people, actually worked with them. One was on my crew and one was my boss, the district manager. Oh. And so the district manager trans is a man that's transitioning to be a woman. And she's like, I don't know what, I call her she because that's what she wants to be called. And so my thing is,
I won't be ordering the Boston being fair.
It's all fun and games when you're just talking about these people like they're not people you know, but when you actually have to go to work with them and you have to like look them in the eye and make shit happen and everybody get along.
Yeah.
How to navigate in the world with, and then the other one is a girl that wants to be a guy. And so it gets confusing.
I've come across that, and I just end up calling him mate.
Okay, yeah, mate or my friend.
Because
I
don't
see my friend a lot.
And I feel terrible. Like I don't know what to do. Like I just say, okay, mate. And it's
the truth is that they're both really
it's kind of universal.
People.
All right.
Like as a person, like we take gender out of it and you just look into this person's soul. First of all, I have a lot of compassion for them because I can't imagine what it would be like to be in a body I didn't feel comfortable in. I mean, so it's almost...
I can beat that. I have an uncle who's a trans activist.
Yeah.
And quite a well-known one too. And he's a nice woman now, but he's a decent person from what I remember and things like that. But I find it very difficult to reconcile who he was when I was a teenager and who she is now. And it's not because I'm bigoted or anything. It's just difficult.
Well, right.
Well, Nicole,
I'm trying to get across to one of my boss now in my new position he absolutely won't call them by their chosen pronouns. And he's very, I would say he's rude to them about it. And I'm not sure that's called for, but I understand where he's coming from too, because dude, do you know what I mean? Like, so
the way I kind of feel about it is like on a one-on-one individual basis, if I know you and you're my friend, and if that's something that you are asking, that I, within our interpersonal relationship, that means something that's respectful to you, I can kind of handle that. But the bottom line for me is really if such and such person, whoever they are, whether they're my friend or they're not, if they can't handle the convictions of their own life choices to be whatever it is, whether it's trans or a religion or I don't really care what it is, anything like that. If they're not strong enough to handle the weight of their own convictions and what it means for them to be valued as a person, that's not my fucking responsibility or anybody else's. Like,
well said.
It's true for anyone. So there's tons of victims running around, in all different shapes and sizes.
We've also spoken on here previously about how the trans thing in some cases can be about some kind of existential crisis that isn't actually to do with sexuality, but the transitioning has been sold or portrayed as a way to somehow solve all your problems. You're deeply troubled, so perhaps if you just become a person, that all your problems will go away. And we know the evidence is coming in thick and fast now that that's not the case. There's a lot of people who have transitioned in various ways who have deeply regretted it. And this is to say nothing against people who made a success of it, but simply in some cases, it's seen as a panacea, like a silver bullet for very deep-seated existential troubles, deep discomfort in your own body.
Yeah, like in the old days, people would join the priesthood or go and live in a monastery. Now they do this.
It's like this whole. It's not even a sexuality thing for, it's like the people that become trans. It's not like these are a bunch of people who have an alternative sexuality or an alternative love language or something. They're doing it to justify some sort of, like you're saying, Greg, a crisis or a mediocrity within themselves. And it's not like these people are actually out there truly in love with someone of a different gender persuasion or whatever it is. They're doing it for a attention grabbing type of thing is what I've seen. It's like they go out there and it's not like this is done out of a place of love or done out of a place of even personal sexual desire, but it's done out of this attention grabbing place. Go ahead, Christian.
You know what? That's 100% right. At least with one of these people that I know, I peg that like they're so plain that the only way maybe they feel like they could get attention.
A peacock effect.
Yeah.
Well, Nicole, I'd like to answer what you said because it's something that's very close to my heart. There is a situation where if you have a colleague and there are legal protections for that colleague to claim that gender in the workplace, then it's more than your own job's worth to go up against the law. If the law is in place, it says you have to call a person she or he because effectively they've chosen to do so. But I mean, I remember you've described knowing trans people. I've known trans people. And I remember meeting one woman who told me that she was transitioning. Well, that's fine. I said, but your rights end where mine begin. I said, and you don't have the right to tell me what my memories of you as a woman are. I said, you don't have the right. She is saying she's transitioned from a man. I said, you don't have the right to tell me what I may think. And you don't have the right to tell me the vocabulary I may use. I said, my door is always open to you. I said, that's my position. I don't condemn you for transitioning or doing what you think is going to make yourself happier. I said, but you're not going to dictate my thoughts and vocabulary to me, particularly in a home environment or not in the workplace. And she's never spoken to me again. And she blocked me the next day on all social media. That, as Thomas Sheridan would put it, that's her journey. As a pagan myself, I very much believe that you cannot control any person in the world other than yourself. And I, like, as I said, I'm not going to compromise my perception of this person or forget about the memories of her when she was a little girl. I know her parents as well, and her parents are exceptionally distraught because she's cut off contact with them. So what I'm actually touching back upon is the cutting off contact, the creating of a vocabulary that they're imposing upon us. That's cult behavior. That's actually classic cult behavior. And I'm sorry, I said to her, you know, I'm not buying into it, and I'm not going to apologize for not buying into it. Earlier this year, as I said, I was checking my pronouns, and I made a conscious decision. By the way, John Waters and Gemma O'Doherty starred in a video of mine released at the end of August, the Shite Toy Show. Thank you.
Great one.
I had a number of advertisements on that, and I had an advertisement for the Queefy Lube for failed men who get pretend vaginas. Now, look, you know, another one was the Ladybird book for the children of transitioning parents. Daddy's gone off his fucking rocker. That's... I did
that one, mate.
Yeah. And I mean,
you illustrated that.
You know, and what I did was I had the daddy looking in the window like that with the big beard. But I then put in something in the footnote. In accordance with the 2015 Gender Recognition Act here in Ireland, a mother who is concerned that daddy's gone off his fucking rocker and who's confronted with this, she is obliged to cede custody of the children and cannot isolate the children from a father who she might in good faith think is suffering from a nervous breakdown or is suffering from, as some of us have said, I think many of these instances of transitioning are actually narcissistic personality disorder. I don't believe, I'm very skeptical about gender dysphoria, having met a person once many years ago who I know, it was a school teacher, a man who I know was genuinely gender dysphoric. And he would be the last person in the world to admit it or to transition. There is a difference between genuine gender dysphoria, which I think is very rare. It exists, but I think it's very rare. And what I see with so many of these people on Twitter, particularly some of the heads in Tenny, which is Tenny is a particularly dangerous and seditious NGO, who are in, you know, all they're like vegans. Every 30 seconds they have to remind us that they're trans. Why? Yes. Why? We don't care, you know? Yes. So, you know, what you're talking about, Nicole, really is this dichotomy between what we feel in our instinct, or whatever your own opinion might be, and what is being imposed upon us, particularly in a work environment, because you've described, Nicole, that you're in a work environment. So it's tricky, particularly when you have, like Ireland, very strong at the moment, militant and badly drafted law, which allows these people to tell you in the work environment the terms you may use about them. Okay, well, that's the work environment. You've got to keep your job. Once I've left work, I'll decide what I'm going to say.
You know what's interesting about that, Christian, what you're saying, and I hope I don't take this off on too much of a tangent, but you were talking about gender, was it dysmorphia? Was that the term you used, gender dysmorphia?
Gender dysphoria.
With that, I think there is a thing where when somebody is planning to incarnate, so they've left their previous body, they've left their previous existence, they've gone through the bardo, and they're planning to incarnate, and the mother that's carrying the fetus has a female child, for instance, and that female child doesn't go to full term, and there's a miscarriage there, and then that family gets pregnant again and say has a male child, and that being that planned to incarnate with that family ends up picking up a male body along the way and may have a struggle because they had planned everything within the bardo, within the in-between lives area of being a woman, for instance. So they dealt with whatever you want to say happens in the bardo. If you've processed all of your karma or whatever it is from your previous incarnations and have all of your plans for your next incarnation, then suddenly that female body that you're planning to incarnate into dies, and you're given an opportunity to be in a male body, there's some sort of adjustment that must occur so that, okay, those goals can be adjusted to a male body with all of its hormones and hardware that it comes with. It's going to be a little bit different with the karmic template, the karmic map that you set yourself out to have for that next incarnation might just be a little out. But if that's the case, I think that very few people who actually have that occur become transgender. I think, you know, maybe there are people like that who become drag queens or who just become, you know, they might have, you know, they might become gay men or lesbian women but because they have a sexual attraction to their same gender that they were assigned to. But I doubt that it's a thing that most of these people who are out there that are claiming to be transgender, claiming to be 57 different genders or whatever it is, they're not the type of person that in the Bardo or in the In Between Lives area ended up getting the wrong body because that last one died with an abortion or with a miscarriage or something. But I mean, I know that goes off kind of in an esoteric tangent in there, but that's kind of something I've thought about quite a bit with that concept of someone who is slated to be a certain gender with their own choices that were made in between lives, and then that just doesn't happen for whatever reason with those parents, and they still carry forward with that family.
Just to add to that, I have to go soon because of a long road journey tomorrow morning. There's a group in the Middle East called the Druze. They're a religious group, and they were once part of Islam, and they're a breakaway sect. There's about 500,000 of them in the Middle East. Most of them live in Israel now, some in Lebanon, some in Syria, and they have a reincarnation belief they believe is proactive. That they actually, and there's a remarkable documentary Channel 4 made of them on YouTube. You can watch it. But what I found remarkable about that is that they always reincarnate into the same gender they were. The ones that they show as the case studies. So there was several in Lebanon who were killed in the Lebanese Civil War. One was a reporter, one was a soccer player, and they both came back as males. And some of these stories are quite moving and quite profound, where families whose son was killed by a rocket one day in Beirut returned as a little boy knocking on the door saying, I used to live here when I was a man. And it's really some remarkable stuff. But what struck me most about the Druze reincarnation is they came back as the same gender. Listen, I have to go, guys. Thank you very much, John, especially for coming along and joining us here tonight.
Thank you, John.
I'll see us all next time. And I'd love to stay, but I have a big road trip tomorrow.
Travel safely.
Thank you.
Great work,
Thank you,
Thomas.
Take care.
I've got to go as well. So thank you very much, everybody, and see you again.
Thank you, John.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Thanks very much, John.
Very much.
God bless. Bye.
I also am going to duck out because I got to go drive to nowhere, Tennessee.
Well, give my love to nowhere.
All right. Thank you guys so much. I apologize for messing
Not
up.
at all. Not at all.
Next time I'll do better.
Thank you.
Also, in regards to all this stuff culturally I didn't mean to cut in, but I just wanted to go and say that there's a bit of good news in terms of the cultural weather in regards to the whole trans thing. I'm just looking at the Overton window across culture, and it's all sort of like people are getting more skeptical about this aspect of cult behavior. So there was the whole Dave Chappelle thing. That was a big watershed moment. So I think a lot of people just realize that and they look at what he's saying, and then they're rational, and then they can piece together. It's like, this man isn't hateful. That's one. Another one was
Dave Chappelle won that, didn't he? Dave Chappelle won that, didn't he? They didn't cancel him.
He did. They tried to go and say, "Oh, you sectioned me out of all jobs." So just needs to go and be another studio that's going to hire him.
And obviously, he was on Joe Rogan as well. Joe Rogan, absolutely massive. So he got on there. In Spotify, they had their own like little woke crew. They failed. They failed in canceling Joe. They failed in canceling Dave Chappelle. So the go woke, go broke thing is happening. This woke thing is failing.
Yeah, It'll still fail upwards. They're going to get more systemized within power. But even across into the BBC, I have this documentary I want to finish called Stonewalled, and it was done by a crowd in Northern Ireland, and they were going against the wishes of the ones in London, and they were critical of Stonewall. A few weeks later, Stonewall is now getting cut out of the BBC and all these other services in the UK and all these other echelons of institutional power. So that's also happening. Even in their media, they have completely lost the battle there. People like anime. They like the positive aspects of the masculine and the feminine. They can talk about gay people rather decently, regardless of whether it's men or women. They've got the whole market down. Japan still has problems, but the
woke thing is failing. Like we said, it's failed on massive scale on Spotify. We thought that they would have their way, but the audience is too big. They can't let Joe Rogan go. Dave Chappelle's too big. His audience is bigger than minorities have loud voice, but it's a very small, it's tiny. This whole woke thing is tiny, but it has a projection from very loud places. but it's tiny. And ultimately, money talks, and you go woke, you go broke. And I even think that the corporation, you know yourselves, guys, that the corporations don't give a fucking shit. You know, they'll do the pride thing for a month, they'll drop it, and they'll virtue signal. But when it comes to money talks and bullshit walks, and you know,
that's it. But even still,
they I think they kind of seeing that the woke thing, they might. I don't even know how to say it. They might entertain it for a while, but it's not winning, which is good.
You know? Yeah, there's a huge gulf between people who say whatever these various agendas we've been talking about, the people who say, I believe this, and and wholeheartedly do at some level, and then those people are just saying it, go along, get along. And I think go along, get along is massive, vast majority. And at the extreme ends, you've got true believers, and you've got people that are just going to call a spade, like ourselves, if you see what I mean. But I think the huge middle is like, I don't really get this. This is fucking weird, but it's what everyone's saying, So I'm just going to go along.
Greg's on it.
Well, I'll tell you something very interesting. In last week's Sunday Independent, now I get the Sunday Independent, we had delivered to the house. Okay. And in last week's Sunday Independent, there was a very good article by Eilish O'Hanlon in which she more or less just puts a sledgehammer through the transgender thing, really. And she says your gender cannot really be determined on the fluctuation of your feelings. And there was a big letter in the Sunday Independent today from Transgender Equality Network Ireland, condemning her. There was another one from a Bernie Linane, who I suspect, this is my own opinion, I'm not going to say anything that might be defamatory, who I suspect may also be of that large school of thought, shall we say. But every other letter in the Sunday Independent today was thanking Eilish O'Hanlon for taking a stand on this, and in particular, the militant trans lobby and how they are, as we perceive it, perhaps infiltrating into schools, how they are so overbearing and so intolerant and so strident. And they're also, of course, government subsidized through TENI. They got the 2015 Gender Recognition Act. I hope that the people who tuned out, Nicole and Thomas and John Waters, I hope they listen into the playback of this if the bugmen haven't go, well, I don't know what platform. It's like Radio Caroline in the 70s. Can we find a platform that'll carry us now? We're like pirate radio.
Yes, actually. There's Odyssey. There's also BitChute as well. People are going to be able to port things and then just record over and get archives of things as well. I've been watching the dude Stick, Sex and Hammer. I'm sure you follow him yourself, Christian.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he's just like, record everything, archive everything, don't use the mainstream media outlets. And that's fine. I'm looking at the mainstream media apparatus and I'm studying this, okay? I'm actually in for a course for it, okay? I've got to go on another year, get a degree perhaps, or I could just leave it what I have now, and that's fine. One of the things, though, is that they have a massive gap for data. They don't have any data. They don't have any people who practice data journalism in that effective sense. They can't be following through the science. That's just going to blow their whole thing apart if it's actually properly looked at. So,
okay, it's blockchain related, says Paul. There, it's blockchain related.
The good thing is with these anything on Beyond Room 313, I'm backing all this up on a hard drive in a few different places. So if this gets taken down off of YouTube,
we still have it,
and I'll just edit out whatever it is that they said that we violated terms of service for. So we've always got the recording. We'll always get it to you. And things, if you all want to upload stuff to Odyssey or wherever, please, that's awesome. But yeah, we just don't have the bandwidth over here to do that.
Well, I've given up on YouTube. I've just given up on them because I'm on a 90-day strike at the moment. We're talking about the thing that I so politely refer to as a loyalty scheme. If you mention the loyalty scheme in anything other than the loyalty scheme terms, or that, you're dead. I'm not going to get back onto YouTube till bloody January. I'm not bothered anymore. I'm not bothered with that crap anymore. No?
Unfazed.
I've got a few people I still follow on it. It's a very handy platform, but these people are themselves, quite aware of what YouTube is like and how they've basically set up a minefield. So they're always keeping sharp to that as well, and they have other sites too.
after many, many years on YouTube, I'm not quite sure how I'm doing it because not all of my content would be deemed controversial, but I've only got 18,500 subscribers, but I've had no problems whatsoever. No bans, no warnings, no nothing. And regarding needlecraft and all this other bullshit, I've done tons of stuff, including loads of pieces to camera where I'm just laying it all out and no problems at all. So, well, go figure.
It's very hard to know what their criteria are, and they don't state it. They do not state their criteria. I mean, just to be polite, I have actually got a button there. I can mute my mic at its button there. And just about 2 minutes ago, I did 2 huge farts in here, but I muted the mic before they came. Because, I said, would that get them a strike on YouTube? Who knows? Or there'll be some bug man would get upset at the fact
just let it rip next time.
Let it rip.
Next time, let it rip.
I just pressed the button there because I will if you really want,
Yes.
I just had to press that button there just to play safe.
The Christian you're a spirit animal.
That's not it there. The bugmen got at it now. It's the EVP. The EVPs heard that now.
Did you fart an EMP?
An EVP.
Amazing.
No. But it's not even that I would be inhibited about it or embarrassed about it all, but I just knew that, like, if my farts came through on this, I know I just if I pressed the button there, you probably had seen me in the clip earlier, doing that. But yeah, I mean, Robert, you said something earlier about normies. And it's something I analysed quite recently. Normies don't have boundaries. If they had boundaries, they wouldn't be normies.
I think that any normal, the abnormal can become normal with them far too quickly, and that's why they're dangerous.
That's why they're very dangerous. They actually don't have a red line. For me and different people, I mean, I would accept that many people in the tribe might well wear a mask. They own. I think it's more. I think a cocky kind of guy like myself can get away with not wearing a mask in supermarkets, and people are somewhat more apprehensive to confront you. But for me, an absolute red line for me was the mask. I was absolutely not willing to wear the mask, and it's primarily because it's degrading. I would find it very, very embarrassing and degrading to wear a mask. I also have gingivitis, which I claimed as my medical reason for not wearing a mask. That if I was wearing a mask, kind of excessive heat and bacteria in my breath, that it would actually really become manky in the mask and would actually become a health risk. And then you'd have a mask that would be throwing away, which would be full of bacteria and that kind of thing. So that was the other reason that I gave to not wear a mask, but primarily is because I don't want to, because I find it profoundly degrading and profoundly embarrassing. And I do believe I did a video on YouTube or on Odyssey in which I talked about the Pied Piper and how if you can get the normies to wear masks, then you can get them to do anything. And the only thing they want to do is to get people to take the needlecraft. I believe Thomas and other people are right about the paedophile thing and all that, but I believe that they're subsidiaries to the needlecraft, and that the needlecraft, I believe, was worked out around 1910, between 1900 and 1910. What we're seeing from 2020 onwards was worked out a very long time ago. Because when we think about what they're trying to pull off here, objectively, what do we think we're trying to pull off here? And it's something that we can't say because we'll get the YouTube, Facebook strike that I've got now because I mentioned the loyalty scheme. But if you actually figure it out logically, then you're not going to pull that off in 10 years. That's going to take a very, very, very long time of preparation to gaslight people, to confuse people, and to get them to the point where then in 2020, you switch it on. In an Odyssey video of mine, I said I believed, and particularly in John Waters talks about the trance in Ireland. Hands up who's not in Ireland at the moment. You don't know RTE. You do, and I say that not flippantly. RTE has a particularly pathological hold on a particularly significant percentage of the population here. And it has a relationship that is quite different from the BBC or from state broadcasters in other countries. RTE has an almost religious thing with a lot of people here, particularly people of, say, I'm 48, but of another generation into their 50s, their 60s, their 70s. And what I think happened was in 2020, they started the stay safe, stay home, we're all in this together stuff. And John hasn't put it in those terms, but I analysed it. I watched the whole country trigger. It was like the whole MK Ultra thing went switched on. And I said to myself only about a week ago, I said, this started in 1960 when they started Television and then merged with Radio Air and became Radio Television. I said, this hasn't been happening for 2 years. This has been a lot longer. I remember in the 80s. Carl, what age are you?
Me, I'm 31.
I'm 48. Yeah. And I remember in the 80s, if you got onto RTE, say if you were an actor on Glen Rowe, or if you were on the Late Show, you were big. Suddenly people believed in you and, hey, because Gay Burnett from the Late Late Show or whatever.
Yeah.
And this has all been drip, 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 drip. And then in 2020, stay home, stay safe, we're all in this together, wear a mask, 3 weeks to flatten the curve. It all switched on. And it's switched on in other countries as well. But the extent to which RTE has that pathological input and that wedge driven into the collective brain of the Irish people is, in my opinion, quite unique here. Not even in Northern Ireland, where their channel is basically coming from London, but here somewhat. Jason, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I was going to say, Christian, with that, it is so incredibly easy for someone in the media or a mainstream media outlet to lay the post-hypnotic suggestions into media, because all it takes is a little bit of unconsciousness. So just a little bit of hypnotism of some sort with a repetitive rhythm or with causing something that might be a traumatic or painful emotion.
Or paralyzing somebody with a fucking scary message.
Right. So that's right there, a traumatic emotion or an actual traumatic event occurring. And there was enough of people flipping their shit back in fucking March of 2020 where people were losing their fucking minds because they thought that there's this deadly thing. I almost did it. This deadly thing that people are all going to be dying from. So you immediately have people hypnotized from that little hook. And within
the images on TV of the
right.
world shutting down. And it's just, and it was fucking scary. Like I remember when all of that stuff was coming across the TV, and it wasn't so much that I was worried about the thing, but just those images were really fucking scary of the world was shutting down. And it was this wave that was coming across, from Europe. And you just knew it was a matter of a couple hours or maybe a couple days before it got here.
So with that, you can hypnotize people with that very fear that Timothy's talking about, where you have someone in a hypnotic state. And when someone's in a hypnotic state, you can implant a post-hypnotic suggestion. And that post-hypnotic suggestion can be added through language that those words of stay home, stay safe might have been within a statement that was read. And then now people have those post-hypnotic suggestions where they hear those things, and like that, they just like the person, I'm sure you've all heard of the analogy of someone, a hypnotist, a stage hypnotist, a stage magician hypnotizing someone, where the guy is under a hypnotic state and he says, okay, when I touch my tie, you'll remove your coat, kind of thing. And then the guy brings him out of hypnosis, and the magician touches his tie and the guy takes his coat off. And the guy who's hypnotized doesn't know why he's taking his coat off. He'll come up with all the excuses in the world of, oh, it's too warm in here. And then the hypnotist will touch his tie again. He's like, oh, I want to show you this new coat that I just got tailored. And his conscious mind won't know why he's responding to the post-hypnotic suggestion. But his unconscious mind, because of that painful emotion, because of that moment of unconsciousness, was hypnotized into that post-hypnotic state of removing his coat. And he will never know why, when that hypnotist touches his tie every time he puts his coat on and takes it off, a man with a removable coat.
There's a really brilliant movie that's new that just came out. We watched it the other night. It's on Netflix and it's called Hypnotic. And I think you guys would like it because it does, within the storyline, it shows very brilliantly what Jason's describing, but it also at the end, it ties in an MK Ultra aspect. And it's like, when you're people who are like us that can see signs and symbolism, and we watch movies for entertainment like other people do too, but you see these things come across the screen and something lights up in your brain and you said that's a message. Most people are gonna get that and have no fucking, it's a story of pure entertainment. They never get it, but they're still
without sounding aloof. I'm sorry.
What was that?
And it's without sounding aloof. It's fucking great to be here with all you guys. Like, I interact with a lot of you guys on Facebook, so it's a fucking honor, right?
Fuck yeah.
Fuck
yeah, Mike.
Awesome, man.
I see Christian.
Love you, Mike.
I see Jason. I see Jade. I see Mr. Hammond. I see Mr. Greg. Even Carl English. I see all these people that I recognize. So fucking, without sounding aloof. When this shit kicked off in 2019? No, 2020.
Yeah. Tail end of 2019 is when it first actually started.
Yeah,
that's right.
So when we had videos in January, February, I was like, this is fucking China. Like, me and my brother were on about China for like 6 months, for a while before this. We kind of seen like North Korea as a smokescreen. We were like, no, China's up to the bad shit. China's up to the bad shit. North Korea's easy. We can all say North Korea's fucked up, right? But we knew that China were up to the
CCP, not China.
Organ harvesting, stuff
CCP.
like that.
Yeah, CCP.
So when this came around, like, I wasn't really bothered. I didn't give a fuck. Like, and even January, February, I just thought, this is China. Like, the images were fucked up, but I still had this kind of thing. I thought, this is China.
It's not, let's be, just on a side note, I agree with what you're saying, but it's not China, it's the CCP.
Right.
The difference.
The Chinese Communist Party. Not the people of China, not Chinese
CCP,
people, but the Chinese Communist Party. The people who've enslaved the Chinese people themselves. The people of China are just as fucked by CCP as we are. Carry on, Mike.
Yep, go ahead.
Carry on.
Okay, yeah, right. Okay, this is the CCP then. At least, you know what I'm saying.
Yes.
So, I mean, my own mother.
You do, but maybe other people won't. So we just have to be clear.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay, so my mum was watching telly and she was just like fucked up. I was like, Mum, what the fuck's wrong with you, man? Like, and she was ill for a week. She was ill. And I'm like, this isn't my mum. Like, and I just went, right, fucking turn this shit off. I turned the telly off. I went, don't fucking watch that anymore. Don't fucking watch it. And this was like January or February. I was like, don't fucking watch that anymore. And like a week later, she said to me, you know what? She says, I feel a lot better. I says, well, yeah. I says, I don't watch the fucking news. But I was like, what do you mean? She's like, well, that was making me really fucking ill. And and I was like, well, good. I was like, I'm glad you've seen it. I says, how do you feel now? She says, I feel okay. I feel a lot better than I did a week ago. She's like, I'm not going to watch that again. And she's like, it's scary how taken in I was by the news. And that was the moment. I think I don't know what happened, but since then, she's obviously, not watched, watch the news for observation sometimes, but yeah, I wouldn't say I saved her life, but it definitely, something happened there where she realized that was not the world that we need to see. And she's been a different person since, but she definitely credits the fact down to fucking stop fucking watching that, man. That's making you ill. And
it's the fear, isn't it?
Negativity, drip feed, negativity,
and it's a constant reinforcement.
Basic stuff, man.
Yeah. Christian,
it was amazing that happened, and my mum thanked me, and she said, "Thank you for doing that, son. You saved me from whatever the fuck it was that was happening to me." So
I did.
Absolutely. Sorry, Christian, before I forget, did you say that they were planning this whole needle juice agenda from 1910? Because
yes, I think so. That's my own. I mean,
I saw a cartoon. Like, someone sent me a cartoon, and it made my jaw drop. It was like a 1920, 1930 cartoon, and I'm kid you not, it had like the first scene was like like maybe like a horse and carriage with bodies going through, and then it had people with gas masks on, and it said, number one, create a false, and then and it had like a tannoy saying, make sure you wear your gas mask when you step outside, and then you had bodies on a conveyor belt, and then you had final solution, needle juice the working class to fix them or kill them off, and they would, and it had a thing, but it was like a spear going into people, you know, and this was like nearly 100 years ago. It's just before I forgot, it made me realise you're probably right, because I mean, that cartoon, I know it was only a cartoon, it just said it all. That was like 1920s or something like that. And we're in, or 30s, and we're in 2021 now, you know?
It's with these people who are at the top of the game, behind the globalists, behind the CCP, behind whatever you want to look at it. They don't make plays like checkers. This is a game of chess, and they think of things in multiple incarnations and multiple generations. They will, right, centuries at a time, and they will infiltrate groups. They will infiltrate organic movements and put people and put things into place long before people will ever suspect that they're infiltrators. Long before people will ever suspect that they're agent provocateurs, they will implant these people. They'll put plants into groups years and years and years and years and years before there's ever an insurrection within that group, so to speak. So it's like when these things actually come to the surface, those plants have been in there for so long that
they feel an organic part of it.
Right, they're a part of it, and the people around associate them with being part of the group. So this is you know, again, this is not a game of checkers; it's a game of chess.
Yes, it's crazy, because that means this event that we're in right now was already thought of, you know, at the same time of the Great Wars and everything. Sorry, Christian, you were going to say something?
No, I mean, I agree with you. A very good friend of mine, I won't mention his name on this session, just for his own privacy, but a very good friend of mine said, you know, he had seen that very slagging video I did last week about the Shite Dublin protest. Timothy, did you see that video I did about the Shite Dublin protest?
Yes, I finally did. I got caught up on all your videos. Fucking brilliant.
And there's this go-boy with a tap in his head. He did tapping, oh God, we got the bus up from Ballintibber. It was a great time. We brought the sandwiches with lemonade. And they came in the hanging cheese onions. Don't forget the hanging cheese onions. But a friend of mine contacted me and he said, you need to see a British film from 1982 called Who Dares Wins. And I watched it finally last night. And right up to the last 30 seconds, I said, this is a really good film. I said, this is a very, very good film. The long and short of it was that a People's Lobby leftist group, which was full of these posh kids, really, was attempting to stage a coup. They had successfully managed to stage a hijack in an ambassadorial residence in the United States, somewhere in London. They had taken over a dinner party and they had everybody held hostage. And then the woman who was in charge of them got through to the head of the police who was looking after it. And he said, well, what are you looking for? She said, well, we want a nuclear bomb to be launched on a holy port or Port Holy or something in Scotland by 3 p.m. tomorrow. And he said to her, okay. He said, stop a second. He said, that's not going to happen. Okay. Now he said, let's work backwards from that and talk about how you don't end up getting killed and the process of getting out of here. Oh, blah, 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 blah. But what we saw at the start of the film was there were these protests which had women and children and kids in prams and people in silly costumes and the clowns, and they had all that carry on. Then they had sessions in the church, Rock for Peace, and they were all using the CND symbolism as well. So just a second. They're using the CND symbolism, and, you know, it was very... They're going to Greenham Common, which is an actual event. And firstly, we look back at it now and say, well, what did they achieve? Did Margaret Thatcher say, oh, well, they had a rock piece in a church in London, so I think I'll get the cabinet to abandon Trident now. Okay, cool. Because a whole load of people in London went in a march. But what freaked me out at the end of it, I actually went weak at the knees at the end of it, was the siege had ended. This is a plot spoiler for anybody who's listening. The siege had ended, and the SAS had liberated the ambassador's residence and had rescued most of the people. Some of them got killed. And then two diplomats were talking in some office in Whitehall, and one of them said, well, that went off pretty well. But below this, he said, but don't worry, we've still got plenty of time. I said, no, this is the loyalty scheme. They were dropping a message there about the loyalty scheme. We've still got plenty of time. Plenty of time to do what? What are they getting at? And that was where, for me, I mean, really, and we probably got our YouTube strike an hour ago. I mean, at the same time, I would be satisfied from a lot of the things that I'm looking at that the loyalty scheme is a trajectory of at least a century. And, you know, by the end of the Industrial Revolution, one of the things that they were observing is that things like coal was a finite resource. Another thing that they were beginning to do at around 1910 was they realized that oil would be a very valuable resource as well. They were beginning to do electrics in 1910. And then they were beginning to say, well, how can we make this sustainable? That's the best way I would put it. We're sure we got our YouTube strike an hour ago anyway. So, you know, but when I saw that film from 1982, Who Dares Wins, and what they said at the end, you know, old chap, we still have plenty of time. Oh, no, I said, no. I would, you know, and I'd love to say to John Waters, wouldn't it be nice if over the last 18 months, any of the things any of us conspiracy theorists had said was wrong? Wouldn't you? Well, could we just think of one thing that we came out with that was wrong?
Sometimes I hate being right.
Right.
Sorry to interrupt. I'm going to disappear. I'm down to 3% battery.
It is time to wrap up.
Here, so.
Thank you so much for coming. I always love seeing you at that pub. I just love it.
Cheers. Well, look forward to having you guys here in person as well.
All right.
Yep. Have a good one.
Thanks for hanging out with you.
Bye, Stephen.
Cheers, guys.
Bye-bye.
All right.
Bye.
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 So one direct.
Jade.
One direct reflection on what you were saying, Christian, about this long-term, if we can use the word agenda, is amongst other things, I work in a medieval cathedral, and I'm always amazed that in the 250 plus years it took to build it, that the people who began the project, they knew from the get-go they would never see it finished. Their sons and daughters would never see it finished. Their grandsons and granddaughters would never see it finished. But they had the mindset to go into something like that, knowing that it was so much more than a life's work. And I think a lot of us, you know, just society in general these days, everything's short-term, get stuff quickly, instant gratification, everything goes, nothing matters, no thought to what comes after our lives are over. And I think that some people behind some of the things that we're experiencing are able to extend their will and their consciousness beyond their own lifetime in a way that most people cannot even begin to grasp. And just one thought before I forget it is just quickly, there's a video I'd like to recommend. You don't have to have any knowledge or interest in Rudolf Steiner or anthroposophy, but if you go onto YouTube and if you look up Rudolf Steiner on epidemics, this is a video, a lecture he gave almost 100 years ago.
He told us 100 years ago.
Yeah, narrated by a guy who does a lot of narration of Steiner lectures. And bear with it. Sometimes it weaves in and out of seeming relevance to today, but some of it is just jaw-dropping, like, whoa, you know? So Rudolf Steiner on epidemics.
So to wrap this all up and end it on a note, what you were saying, Greg, yes, everybody does need to go and study Rudolf Steiner because he told us this shit 100 years ago. But what you were saying and what Jason was saying too, with how, you know, the dark side of things plans things, you know, decades and centuries and things in advance. Well, we can do that shit too.
Mm-hmm.
And we do that stuff. And it's that chessboard of, the blacks and the whites, or that sounds really bad. Shouldn't have said that. But you know what I mean?
It's light versus dark.
Yeah. The lights and the dark, whatever. Yeah.
The positive spiritual versus the negative spiritual.
I'm the one that's going to get us pulled off Facebook. but to be serious, which is really hard to do now. But we can do that shit too, and we play a long game as well. And like those of us who are parents, and you don't have to be a parent to do this, but those of us who are parents, my son is 7. I'm teaching him how to think in a way that he is an autonomous person for thinking these types of ways. And I've explained to him in appropriate terms for a 7-year-old why certain things are not going to be put into his body, and for very specific reasons why. And he understands these things now. And he has his own thoughts about it. And just the other day, he was like, Mom, if I'm ever at school and somebody ever says that they're going to put something into my body that I don't want, I'm going to tell them to fuck off. And I said, you have 100% right to do that. And if somebody ever tries to do anything to you that, first of all, you haven't consented to, but second of all, since you are still a minor and don't understand a lot of things that I have not consented to, or your dad has not consented to, you have complete permission from both of us to physically defend yourself in whatever manner that you see fit. So having said that, I know we all have to get going. Let's play this long game. Let's plan for the next few centuries, even though, we're not going to be here for that, but we're going to lay those seeds. And the people that come after us, who are our predecessors, whether they're our children or just other people who are younger than us that may see this, and they're going to outlast us, and they're going to tell it to their descendants and their people. That's how we hold the line.
Be a player in the game, not a piece.
Yeah.
Be a player, not a piece. Cool.
Yeah, I've had similar conversations with mine. Very, very similar conversations.
Yeah, our kids are the same age, so.
Yeah. They have the same rock going on.
Yeah.
I think we can reassure ourselves that it's a lonely place to be ahead of your time, but we are ahead of our time, and we will be on the right side of history. I do think that.
And it can feel lonely sometimes, but since knowing all of you, I don't feel like that anymore. And though we're thousands and thousands of miles apart, crossing oceans and all that shit, it's really that entanglement that matters. We're all occupying the same place at the same time. So I just want to extend my heartfelt gratitude for all of you guys. You make life fucking worth living. And you make me fucking proud to be a part of this.
Live up to the virtues of the gods and keep on going.
All right. Love you guys.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Take it easy.
See you soon. Bye, everyone. Take care.
May the rock God smile upon you all.
Yes.
Love you, Mike.